Mormonism is more than a false religion. It is a deception risen from the depths where satanic currents flow freely, where the lusts of the flesh are divinized, where grace and truth mean nothing. In Mormon connections, there are spiritual powers at play that can work their permanent harm on a person who voluntarily has to do with the Mormons. Mormonism is the worst kind of occultism. And again, this is, of course, a somewhat isolated example, so not to exaggerate the width of these statements. Then on to the modern period. Its beginning is marked by the formation of the Helsinki, Finland stake of the Church in October 1977. This coming of age for Mormonism in Finland occurred approximately simultaneously with the onset of a period that could be called that of modern anti-cultism and counter-cultism. The 1980s turned out to be an especially turbulent decade. Non-Mormon historian Lawrence Foster has called Gerald and Sandra Tanner career apostates, signifying persons who devote their lives to the destruction of their former faith. In the 1980s, Finnish Mormonism was to produce its own career apostates, although perhaps not quite as committed to the cause as the Tanners. This couple is Pentti and Terttu Maljanen. Their last name has now been changed to Forssell. They joined the Mormon Church in the eastern Finland city of Kuopio in 1965, after having met with Latter-day Saint missionaries and listened to their religious teaching. They became active participants in their branch and served in various capacities, Terttu as Relief Society president and Pentti as a counselor in the branch presidency. The final turning point in their membership was the year 1975, when they first attended the Latter-day Saint endowment ceremony in the Mormon temple near Bern, Switzerland. After this trip, especially Pentti became increasingly critical of Mormonism, and in 1979 he and Terttu returned to membership in the Lutheran Church. The modern criticism of Mormonism in Finland can be said to have begun from this event, and the opposition became personified in the Forssells. They have continued their activities up to this day. Pentti is no longer active in his opposition, but Terttu still gives interviews to newspapers. In 1982, Pentti published the book Pääsin irti mormoneista, which loosely translated is I Got Loose from the Mormons. In it, he details his and his wife's story in Mormonism and portrays various Mormon doctrines and practices in a generally very negative light, although he also had some positive things to say. However, his message was to stay away from the Mormons. When the missionaries come, quote, your doors, don't open. Don't ask them in, don't ask them to come again. Even a small friendly gesture, and unbeknownst to yourselves, you will be investigators. Investigators who won't be left in peace until you have been led into eternal deception to being members in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The book was widely reviewed in newspapers around Finland. Pentti also began to speak about the Mormons and his Mormon experience at Lutheran religious gatherings, and with Terttu accompanying him. In these gatherings, they shared their atrocity story and portrayed Mormonism in a very negative light. At some point, they also began to exhibit Mormon temple clothing to the gathered audiences. In 1987, the Forssell couple was on national radio telling of their experience as former Mormons. This and the experience recounted by the former member of another faith resulted in a flurry of telephone calls to the radio station. Calls began to be forwarded to the Forssells, and the situation finally led to the organization of Finland's only anti-cult organization, Uskontojen uhrien tuki, approximately translated as support for the victims of religions. This organization is active up to this day, and its website deals with Mormonism as one dangerous religion, although the treatment is brief. The experience of the Forssell couple has no doubt had a significant effect on how Mormonism is portrayed by the organization. One more serious matter that the Forssells helped create and bring to the forefront in the early 1980s was suspicions of Latter-day Saint missionaries being involved with furthering American political goals. More exactly, it was alleged the missionaries gathered information on Finnish people's political opinions, and that this data was possibly forwarded to the United States. Naturally, this did not go over well in leftist circles, and even led to 2 questions being asked of the government on the floor of Parliament. The matter was publicized mostly in left-wing newspapers because those on the political left were more suspicious of matters connected to the United States, but negative reporting in mainstream national newspapers also appeared. In any case, the Mormons were exonerated in Parliament, and no real evidence backing up the suspicions ever surfaced. In fact, the most publicized evidence that Pentti Forssell used and gave to the media consisted of some of his son's mission time papers that he had copied without permission. The impact of this highly controversial episode is difficult to assess. However, it is not unlikely that a few Finns felt the same way as this particular columnist. Quote, after the news in Helsingin Sanomat, the main paper in Finland, the Mormons no longer have any business in Ballu's apartment. I must say, though, and emphasize in light of some recent publicity here on this issue, that this view of missionaries as spies is not prevalent in Finland, and nor is it a problem for the Latter-day Saints there at the moment, although it has come up a few times through the years. The Finnish school system includes religion in its curriculum. The Forsels were asked to visit school religion classes in the 1980s and 1990s, to some extent, to explain Mormon beliefs and sometimes to inform the students about other minority religions that were regarded as suspicious. One non-Mormon student remembers a high school class where the Forsels exhibited Mormon temple clothing and even warned the students against reading Donald Duck, because it might contain Mormon symbolism. Such classes could also include warnings about speaking with Mormon missionaries. One of the issues surely producing most sympathy towards these former Mormons and antagonism towards Mormonism was their later depiction of their still Mormon son's missionary experience. Quote, "When our son left to the USA for his mission, we got a letter where we were told that the boy now has new parents. Fortunately, it at least said where he had been adopted to. In reality, their son served as a Mormon missionary in Finland." In general, one can say that a lot of the Forsels' material came from American sources. They were clearly influenced by the wave of religious opposition to Mormonism that came from evangelical Christians in the United States in the 1980s, most notably from Ed Decker. Importing some of the arguments of these post-rationalists, as non-Mormon scholar Massimo Introvigna has called them, they sometimes let their listeners or readers understand that Mormonism has something satanic behind it. At other times, they painted a dismal picture of Utah by using negative-sounding suicide and teen pregnancy statistics that were also being used by counter-cultists in the United States. When analyzing the activities of the Forsell couple, it is interesting to note that their approach varies depending on the venue. In newspapers, their Mormon critical rhetoric is often focused on secular arguments, accusing Mormonism of too strong control of the membership's lives and the withholding and step-by-step disclosure of information related to more advanced Mormon doctrines and practices. At religious gatherings, they also bring religiously colored arguments to bear. For example, they may complain of satanic influences in Mormon temples and speak about how the Mormon view of God is distorted and blasphemous due to the Mormon doctrine of human deification. Although the Forsels are certainly the most well-known critics, they are not the only persons publicly related to the opposition of Mormonism in Finland in modern times. Two of the other personalities on the current scene, although practically invisible at the moment, are Dennis and Rauni Higley in Sandy, Utah. Rauni is originally a Finnish citizen and served as a Mormon missionary in Finland. Dennis is an American who also served as a Mormon missionary in Finland. They eventually met up in Utah and were married. While working as a translator for the church, Rauni began to doubt church teachings, and her husband eventually followed suit. They left the church together in the 1980s and became evangelical Christians. They later established He is Savior, HIS Ministries, which among other things focuses on informing people about Mormonism. They have been active in sending material to Finland to the Forsell couple, and their anti-Mormon tract can be read in Finnish on the internet. Similarly to the Forsell couple, the Higleys have been highly influenced by the evangelical countercult arguments of the 1980s. During Rauni's stay in Finland in 1984, for example, she was instrumental in the inception of a very sensationalistic religious magazine article on the Mormons. The material was heavily drawn from arguments in the book and movie The Godmakers, with in-temple screenshots provided as illustrations. Some of the article's statements convey the mood. Quote, "The truth is kept secret on purpose. It is not meant but for the few and chosen, for Mormonism is a pagan religion tied to secret doctrines, mysteries, and occultism. On its most secret levels, a Luciferian doctrine is unveiled as the background. Mormonism is based on a secret for the simple reason of the truth being too gruesome for a normal, ordinary person. Joseph Smith founded his religion based on completely mind-boggling tales." The next issue of the magazine contained another article on the Mormons, including a large picture of a contemplative Pentti Forsell in Mormon temple garments. The Christianity of the Mormons is explicitly denied by the Forsels. Quote, "Grace is not known in Mormonism. It is a law religion in which the atonement of Christ doesn't matter. A Mormon pays with his own blood." Another important figure in contemporary opposition is Matti Liljeqvist, an academically trained theologian who has also worked as a Lutheran pastor. He has been active on the anti-Mormon scene since the 1980s, working together with the Forsell couple and giving presentations and interviews. In 2004, he published a book called The Tower and the Temple, Meeting the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons. His general attitude regarding Mormonism is perhaps best summed up in the following statement about Latter-day Saint temples. We can define the temple not only as an unnecessary but as a harmful establishment. It leads people to worship a false god